My name is Tyson Decker, and I'm with the Interpretation and Education Division of California State Parks. I'm here at the Statewide Museum Collections Center, which is a first responder for the statewide collection. Let's take a peek at some of the people that make this place work.
Hello, my name is Will Jure, and I'm a Museum Curator 2 with California State Parks. Here at the Statewide Museum Collections Center, we curate a collection of over 1 million objects, including historic objects, artifacts, archaeological specimens, and architectural features. We have a team of curators, archivists, archaeologists, and other collection managers overseeing the preservation and access to this collection. We are located on the McClellan Air Force Base. In fact, SMCC used to be a large storage warehouse for aircraft parts. We were able to utilize that shell, which included key features such as 8-inch thick walls for preservation. It's set up originally for train loading and unloading, which means we have 44 inches of built-in flood protection on our foundation. We were able to then retrofit that space to create a prototype state-of-the-art storage environment utilizing a custom HVAC system that maintains an exemplary climate for our objects while operating as a LEED Silver facility, which means we're utilizing 30% of the energy normally utilized for a facility of this size. Our facility has over 160,000 square feet of climate-controlled storage space for our objects, which feature over 12 miles of standard shelving and over 3.5 miles of pallet-style shelving. Additionally, we have 50,000 square feet of unconditioned space, which we utilize as a quarantine site as well as an intake place for our role in emergency response. Our collections include the core collections of the Statewide Museum Collections Center, those of Capital District. We also have the State Parks Archives, the Photographic Archives, and the Statewide Archaeological Collections Facility on site. These specialists provide experience, expertise, and assistance during emergency situations across California State Parks. Welcome.
Let's talk about the role that SMCC plays in emergency management, beginning with the story of the Dyer House in 2003. Detroit entrepreneur Ralph Dyer bought Rancho Cuyamaca in 1923. It was a 20,000-acre estate in the mountains east of San Diego, an ideal spot for movie stars and moguls to get away from the bustle of Los Angeles and enjoy the crisp mountain air. To enhance his visitors' and families' outings, Dyer built what he called the cabin. It was large but rustic, arts and crafts house made from stone and timbers of an old mining operation. In 1932, he sold this estate to the Division of Beaches and Parks, the predecessor to California's Department of Parks and Recreation. Many considered the Dyer House one of the department's treasured historical resources, not only because of the historical significance of the building itself, but also because it became an important repository of historically significant artifacts, documents, furnishings, and other unique and irreplaceable items. In 2003, the Cedar Fire burned over 273,000 acres, destroying 2,820 buildings. Sadly, the Dyer House, with all of its contents, was one of the buildings destroyed. Park staff managed to salvage a handful of items, but the vast majority of the collection didn't survive the fire. But with hardship comes hard-learned lessons. Determined to protect resources from future emergencies, the Parks Cultural Resources Division developed the Emergency Preparedness and Response Program. As a result, Parks archaeologists, historians, and curators all over the state have been trained as cultural resource advisors. Specially trained technical specialists now work alongside emergency response teams to plan and implement operations to better protect sites, buildings, and museum collections during an incident. Subsequent events have suggested that these measures are paying off. When the Tubbs and Nuns fires ravaged Sonoma and Napa counties in 2017, resource advisors joined the local staff to protect cultural resources according to best emergency practices. With ashes falling around them, a multidisciplinary task force assessed threats and implemented plans that effectively protected the threatened collections at Jack London State Historic Park, General Vallejo's home in downtown Sonoma, the Bale Grist Mill, and the Sonoma Mission and Barracks, as well as numerous archaeological resources. Parks is improving the way we respond to emergencies, but it is still trial by fire, and each incident brings different situations, environmental conditions, and variables. Each new challenge gives us new opportunities to fulfill the promise of our department's mission statement, protecting California's most valued natural and cultural resources. Whenever an emergency threatens resources, the first response happens in the field. Let's get some perspective from somebody who knows what that's like.
Hi, I'm Nancy Jenner. I'm a curator for Capital District in state parks. I work for Sutters Fort State Historic Park and also the State Indian Museum. On July 28th, 2018, we received a call that parks needed to evacuate Shasta State Historic Park, which had been threatened earlier in the week, but the fire was coming back. There was an opportunity to evacuate museum objects from buildings before that wind shift happened, and we were able to mobilize a crew and get people out there. We met at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. The first thing we had to do was unpack all the trucks that were already loaded with the things that had come down earlier in the week. We had a long drive, about a 3-hour drive up to Redding, and didn't even get to the park until about 2 in the afternoon. So time was really of the essence. We had a little bit of time to try and do as much as we could. I was made the curator in charge of packing the Lich store. The Lich store is a general store that became part of the park system with all of its contents intact. The context is what's really important there. And as outsiders, we had no way of knowing which objects were original, which objects were props, what was really important to the story and what wasn't. So we had to just sort of guess. My triage solution was to take pictures of each section and then assign a number to that section, put it on a Post-it note, and then I asked the people who were doing the packing to include that number on the box so that when everything was able to come back to the park, it would be easier to restore things to their proper context. I was thinking about the future curator who would be trying to reassemble the exhibit, and I didn't want to lose all that important provenience information. We only had a few hours on site. We had to leave really suddenly when the wind shifted. In fact, we got to see the emergency vehicles leaving while we were still packing. It was a 14-hour day, and we spent 4 hours on site. So every minute of time was really important in terms of what we could save and what we couldn't save. I did find out later that there was an inventory for the Lich store. We just didn't have it ready. We didn't have it as part of a plan when we were doing the work. And it's something that I knew that for my own parks that I'm in charge of, I didn't have my emergency plan finished. My emergency plan is in a state of perpetual, it's a draft, and I'm always working on it. One thing that I did when I came back was I made a map of each of the exhibit rooms that I'm responsible for, put photos of the most important objects. If somebody had to evacuate our museums, I want them to know what I prioritize, what's most important, what they look like, and where they are in the building. And that was my takeaway from my experience working on the car fire.
After the Shasta evacuation, California State Parks partnered with the State Library to establish 6 emergency caches in select areas of the state. The caches consist of packing materials and equipment stored in a shipping container that could be quickly deployed to an incident and used to pack artifacts, museum objects, or archival materials that may be stored in threatened historic buildings or facilities. The caches were originally funded by FEMA using a Cal OES grant, but stored and maintained by parks. SMCC staff developed training to educate park staff proper packing techniques so they can assist with packing and evacuation of fragile cultural objects.
Hi, I'm Jenna Peterson. I'm a curator here at the Statewide Museum Collections Center. I helped respond to the fires at Shasta, and what I discovered was a lot of the staff was maintenance workers, rangers, park aides, office staff, and they had never worked with collections. We realized that staff needed to be trained to help pack an emergency because you never know who's going to be able to respond. So in our trainings, we demonstrated best practices for packing and handling objects, and then we took them in a room and gave them several prop objects and the materials that they would have on hand in emergency, and had them practice packing. I'm going to demonstrate how to pack a textile according to best standards. You don't want to add any stress to the fabric by having folds in the material. So what I've done is I have created tissue pillows and rolls, and here in the arms, so that the fabric isn't folding on itself, and also in the bottom of the skirt. And I've laid the dress on a piece of tissue paper so that it will be easy to lift it and put it in the box without causing any stress to the fabric. So I've lined the box with tissue paper to create a buffer, and now we're going to move the dress into the box. First, we're going to tuck the arms and the side of the skirt in. And then we're going to lift, and we're going to keep the neck of the dress to the top of the box. Now that we have the dress in the box, we're going to come over, and we have a roll on this end that will make a gentle fold as we finish putting the dress in the box. And now we're going to go to the other table and learn how to pack a clock. So just a few things to take care of when you are packing a clock. You want to actually remove the pendulum. It's rather heavy, and if it moves in shipment, it can break the glass or the wood. Also the weights. We've taken both weights out of this. That can also cause a lot of damage to your clock. If you're unable to remove the weights or the pendulum, if you wrap them with a lot of ethafoam, that will do the same thing. You can also lift the clock face and put a little bit of ethafoam on each side. And when you're packing this, you want to wrap it in ethafoam. And you probably might not have a box that this will fit into, so you may need to create a custom box for it. And we do include Blue Board in our emergency supplies so that you can create a custom box. Another object we find in many of our parks are baskets. This particular basket has been housed nicely, and if I were in emergency response, I would probably keep it as is. It has a nice base supporting it. I would put it in a box, and I would kind of bundle tissue around it so that it wouldn't move in the box. However, you might not get that lucky in emergency response. You may not have it packed so nicely, so I am going to take it out of its packaging very gently. When handling a basket, you never want to grab it by the rim. That's a point of stress. You always want to get as close to the base as you can. One thing you can do is create a nest for your basket if you don't have a nice box like this, and you simply get a square of tissue and you just start rolling, and you just roll in a circle. So you have a nice little nest that you can rest your basket in. And then you can build bundles of tissue around it in a box and keep it from moving. You might want to also pack the lid separately. Here they kind of have it resting on top. But you may want to create another nest, put a little bit of tissue in here and rest it in there, and that can sit on top of the basket in the box as it's not that heavy. You may also have feathered baskets at your park unit, and you're not able to lift them very easily because of the feathers. So I'm going to use this beaker as a demonstration. You simply put your hand in and apply pressure, and that allows you to lift it. One way to pack those is to create sort of a base of tissue paper, and then you would place this part into the basket, and then you're able to grab the base, tip it over, and now you're able to stabilize it in the box and pack around it without any of the feathers being harmed.
Evacuated collections arrive at SMCC in large moving trucks and unloading begins. There is always concern with introducing pests and mold into the permanent collection. Therefore, all collections are isolated and monitored once they arrive. After a period of isolation, curatorial staff review the collection, update the location information in the State Parks Museum Collection database, and make preliminary condition assessments. Any damage such as smoke, water, or physical damage is noted. Steps are taken to eliminate pests and arrest mold. Let's find out more about that.
My name is Andrew Case. I'm a museum technician with California State Parks. Work here at SMCC. Low temperature treatment is a low risk process. Low risk for the objects, minimal risk for staff, especially when compared to other treatment processes such as chemical treatment or fumigation and so forth. In addition to treating pest activity, we can also treat moldy objects. The freezing process will deactivate the mold, not kill it, but deactivate it so that we can clean it up afterwards. Not every object, not every type of object should or can be frozen. For instance, metal, glass, ceramic objects, there's no need to freeze. We do not freeze artwork, and we try not to freeze leather or silk items unless absolutely necessary. As for the objects that can be frozen, mostly they're going to be made from natural materials such as wood, like architectural elements, textiles, paper, basketry. Furniture can be a little bit tricky. Because the process can harm painted or finished surfaces, but we will freeze furniture, especially upholstered furniture, if it was coming from a poor storage environment. So behind me is our large freezer. It's about 20 feet deep, 7.5 feet wide. It reaches the temperature of negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, any pest activity will be eliminated within 48 hours. Our policy is usually to keep items in here for 3 to 4 days just to be extra safe. The freezer will accommodate about up to 8 pallets worth of objects. We also can put objects on rolling racks in here. The freezer is also large enough to fit larger items such as wagons. When objects are frozen, we wrap them in plastic, and that is to prevent condensation from forming on the object. Once the objects are removed from the freezer, they're brought up to room temperature. So usually about a day after they're removed from the freezer, we unwrap the objects. At that point, they're ready to be cleaned and then introduced into our climate-controlled storage areas.
Once the collections are secure at SMCC and the emergency that led to the removal has concluded, next steps depend on several variables. Has the facility, whether it's a museum, visitor center, or historic building, survived the emergency? Was there damage to the building besides being burnt by fire? The facility could be damaged by water during fire suppression or suffer smoke damage. In addition to the physical condition, the facility must also be secure. While some objects are prepped for a quick return to the park, the district staff may need more time until the park is ready to receive their collections. Some objects will remain at the SMCC climate-controlled storage areas for long-term safe storage.
Hi, my name is Josh Nowakowski. I'm the District Collections Manager for the North Coast Redwoods District. We are a fairly large and remote district where the main challenge of my job is centralizing information and collections for the ease of use at visitor centers and the museum at Fort Humboldt State Historic Park. We have utilized the SMCC for both receiving objects for display and sending objects for permanent storage. For example, a reproduction of the surgeon's quarters was built at Fort Humboldt State Historic Park, but the district did not have any objects to place in the building to complete interpretive goals. We were able to work with the SMCC to furnish the surgeon's quarters with era-appropriate objects. This saved us a lot of time in finding and acquiring appropriate objects. Instead, we were able to utilize collections already in the museum system and in the care of the SMCC. We also plan on using the SMCC to take collections no longer needed in our district. We have 4 wagons that do not fit interpretive goals, and there's no appropriate storage for in the district. I have been working with staff at the SMCC to find more information about these wagons and explore all options for relocation, whether that be at the SMCC or through deaccessioning. The staff has greatly helped at making the relocation of the wagons a joint effort between my district and the SMCC. Working with the SMCC allows for more resources and knowledge to be invested in my district's collections. I also know that I'm not alone when facing any problems. This is especially true in the case of emergencies such as fire, which is becoming more and more of an issue in California. The SMCC periodically updates the location and status of emergency stashes stocked with supplies for moving collections safely and professionally. They also update collections managers on the success or failures of previous relocations during fire, letting us all know what situations come up and how to handle them. Whether it's routine inventories, updating object displays, or emergency evacuations, I know that the SMCC has professional and knowledgeable staff to help me.
SMCC has an important role in emergency response and preparedness throughout parks, but perhaps more important is the work they do every day to preserve and protect California's irreplaceable objects and archives associated with the state's diverse cultural heritage.